Hello, I am Sasha T, she, her, and I work in the internal comms team. And today we're bringing you our very first Life on the Island podcast. And we're super excited because the theme for this podcast is Learning at Work Week. So what better way to kick off this podcast with that theme than with two amazing guests who work in our L&D team. I'm not going to tell you what they do. They're going to introduce themselves. I know who you are, obviously, but can you... what we're going to do with these podcasts is we want our guests to write down a quote that kind of sets the theme for the podcast. So can you write... Cameo, you write down your podcast. I've just told you your name, I'm sorry. You write down the podcast quote, and then can you introduce yourself? I nearly said your name then.
Of course, no worries. It feels weird that we can't use each other's names.
I know.
So, hi everyone, I'm Tom Kirk, he, him pronouns, and I am the learning partner for retail. I look after all things L&D in retail, and that ranges from working with our store teams all the way through to working with our retail leadership teams to try and really embed a learning culture.
Amazing, I love it. Do you have your quote?
I do.
Can you tell us your quote and then we'll get your intro and then
And then we'll swap over. Got it. So my quote is, we learn with our heads, we show it through our heart and our hands.
I love that. So hand the board to Tom.
There you go, Tom. What do you think? What's your favourite learning quote?
Well, you introduce yourself first, and Tom's going to write his quote, and then...
Perfect. Hi everyone, my name's Cameo, my pronouns are she, her, and I am the head office learning partner. So if you're sitting in the head office space and you want to come find me to talk about management or leadership or coaching or any of that, that would be what I would be able to support you in.
Perfect. And then quote number two.
Quote number two, slightly less personal than Cameo's, I would say, but my quote is, learning is power, which is slightly adapted from the whole knowledge is power quote, but I think this is a really important one for me because every day is a school day, literally, and we underestimate the power that learning can have, and if we really start to embrace even the small things that we learn on a daily basis, those little steps will add up to massive changes and we'll achieve great things.
I feel like the podcast could end here with those quotes. We've done it now. We're finished. That's amazing. So first question is Learning at Work Week. So that's kind of the theme. And you both work in our learning and development team. So what is the difference between learning and development? Because they're clumped together and people kind of just put them in a bracket and say what it is. But can you give us the definition of both? Why are they different and why are they important?
Good question. Do you want to go first?
Go on then. Shouldn't have whispered, but yes. Go on then. So learning is something that you will be doing every single day. You're constantly picking up lots of different pieces of knowledge, and it can be conscious, but a lot of the time it's unconscious. You're always learning. Development is something that's a little bit more conscious. You're building, taking all those things that you've learned to create, I don't know, a new skill, a new pathway, but it's a conscious thought process rather than just the information that you're taking in. But that's what I'd say learning and development is the difference. What about you, Tom?
I think you've stolen my thunder a bit there. I don't know what I'm going to say now. No, I think exactly this is where the team splits. I think you're very aligned in the way that I'm thinking. So our bodies are amazing things. We make thousands of conscious and unconscious decisions every day. Leaders in the business make tens of thousands of decisions every day. And for me, learning is part of those decision makings that we make. And it's a case of we're always learning something. Whether you're walking down the street, you're seeing something, you're always taking in that information, interpret it, and then learning something in some way. Development is a bit more structured towards a goal. So it might be that you're learning to drive. You would learn in a car, regardless of whether you were doing that in general or being a passenger in a car. If you was learning to drive to pass a test, your development would be working towards that end goal and piecing together those experiences to a bigger goal.
I like the analogy there, because my parents will probably say I need a bit more development in my life. I learned, but I need a bit more development. We'll talk to you about that later. Moving on to food. Okay, so my next question is, obviously everyone has their different learning styles and everyone finds their learning in different ways and figures out how they learn in different ways. So how did you find your learning style? What is your learning style? How does it work for you?
It's a really good question, and I think it's something that we need to encourage people to be more confident to talk about. So my learning style, I would say, is I like to be fully immersed in a situation. So if that's learning a new skill or meeting new people or even practicing a skill, I want to be within it in its entirety. So I want to observe it, I want to experience it, I want to feel it, and then I want to reflect on it. And I think only by doing all of those 4 things can I then go away and really have the time to digest and sort of embed that skill. Because that's the difficult bit. We can all learn information on a daily basis, but if we don't take that time afterwards to sort of embed and practice it, we very quickly lose it. So I think that's an important thing for me, is having that opportunity to follow up and embed that learning, but also to be able to feel what's happening. Because I'm quite big on emotion. If anybody's not worked with me before, it's important for me to be able to feel an emotional connection to something.
Yeah. But then if you're not getting something from somebody, like say for example in a meeting, they're teaching you something and they're not doing it in the way that you learn, do you then say, I learn this way, or do you go away and figure it out your own way?
I probably don't practice what I preach. I should say in that moment, can we look at this in a different way? You're not getting... No, it's good. I'm glad you're challenging us on it. We should be challenging people, so it's good that you're challenging us, that we should be confident in saying that to people, and that I need to really live and breathe what you're saying. So a lot of the work that I do, I tend to be out and about quite a lot in the field, working with our retail teams, and that's massively helped my understanding and learning of my role, because I understand their role a little bit better. So having more confidence to have those conversations, I think, is really important.
Amazing. And you, Caballero?
Well, I think we've got some similarities in how we learn and some differences, actually, in terms of, you talked about that immersive space, and I think I'm quite sort of multi-sensory in that sense as well. If I was just given everything written down on a document, that wouldn't sort of be enough for me. I want to be able to talk it through. I want to be able to see something visual. So for me, having the same topic or same thing I'm trying to learn, but in all of those different ways, it's really helpful for me to understand. Similarly, I don't know if you guys have ever, when you watch TV and you watch it with the subtitles on, but you still have the sound.
Yeah.
So I need all of those bits just in case my brain doesn't pick up something. But I was thinking about what you were saying to Tom about, do you share how you learn with people? And this is something I've been trying to do a lot more recently, because I do have dyslexia, so I don't share that a lot with people, and I just sort of muddle on through. But when topics are harder, or you've got a lot going on all at once, it's really important to share what those needs might be, because otherwise you can get a little left behind. Well, but it's a harder thing to do.
Would you say then, based on what you just said, not that I'm trying to make this really awkward,
no,
but based on what you just said, would you say that you should share your learning style when you need to, or should you just share it anyway so people are aware? Because obviously you said when dyslexia becomes a problem for you, then you're like, then I'll let people know. But do you feel like you should just share it anyway so it's on the table? I
think it's up to whether or not you're comfortable with it. I definitely think with your immediate team, people you're going to be working with day to day, 100% your manager, so that you can sort of watch that journey together and make sure that you've got everything you need to be able to be successful in what you're doing. I don't think you need to tell everybody and it be
in your email signature.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be in your email signature.
A hat with it on it.
But unless that's something that you really want to shout about and you want to share that experience, but I do think it's something that should be thought about for your team, or even going into maybe new situations and assess it yourself. Do you think this is a time where maybe I should share because this is really important, or it's really going to be a new thing for me, that I should give some information to make sure that I'm able to actually do my job as the best that I can do it.
Definitely. And I think, just piggybacking on that, I think to our leaders that'll be watching this back, I think it's important that they use some of that information and think, how can I apply this when I'm trying to bring my team onto a new project, or how can I apply this if we're going to talk about something that's quite a difficult and comprehensive topic, how can I adapt my style to be able to support my team learn differently versus everybody doing the same thing, which is why we're trying to encourage people to have these conversations more, so we're all more upskilled on the different tools we can use to help people to learn.
Love it. I'm literally sitting like... Now, one thing I really, really want to ask you is about learning myths, because everyone has them. Everyone thinks they know what learning is and they've got their idea of it. And then we've created this idea of like certain myths. For example, you only learn at school and then when you leave, it stops there. Like that's a big learning myth. So are there any other myths that you've heard that you want to bust? We're going to put them all on the table. We're going to bust them right now because you guys are the best people to do it. So tell us about your learning myths and also bust that learning stops at school myth. This is for you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you. I would say one of the biggest ones is that the only space that you learn is through a workshop, is through classroom-based learning. Whereas really and truly, that should only be 10% of where you learn at work. 20% should be through social interactions with your team and your manager, and 70% of that should be spent learning on the job, getting stuck in, making those mistakes, and picking up all of that information while you're moving forward within your role. So really and truly, a big part of it is based on you and your environment rather than coming to a workshop, which are still very helpful, but it should only be a small percentage of that time.
Yeah, those workshops are usually to introduce a concept or to supplement an idea or something that you've maybe not heard before. But the big piece after following up that workshop is your embedding. So you taking that away and then having that conversation with your line manager and embedding it into your day-to-day. That's the bit that people tend to forget about because they think, oh, I've been on a workshop about leadership, so I'm a leader now. They don't think about the next step and keeping themselves accountable. One thing that we touched on there is the whole 20% being around social interaction. The people that are most effective at learning and the people that continue their learning journey interact and encourage people to have those social interactions on a daily basis. So if we can create pockets and spaces where islanders feel like they can have conversations that are relevant to learning while they're on the job, we're almost sort of doing both of those things at the same time. We're encouraging people to be operationally strong in terms of whatever their day-to-day job is, but also encouraging people to pad out some of those core skills that are more around communicating, influencing people, adapting how we speak, serving customers, for example. That's where we'll really see a massive benefit to people versus you need to attend this online course or you need to do this workshop and it'll solve all of our problems.
Yeah, I think there's obviously, like from what you're saying, there's good balance to have, and obviously we've spoken before about everyone having different learning styles, but it's about knowing your audience and trying to get people to mingle together and learn together.
Definitely, and I think another one for me, just a really quick one, is that people think you only really learn through a qualification, and that's definitely something I've been guilty of in my career and prior to working in learning and development, is I'm only going to learn something if I'm doing something to make me qualified. So I needed to go to uni, I needed to do a master's, I needed to study this, I needed to study that in order to continue my learning journey, when the reality is I've learned more in my 10 months working here than I have on any qualification that I've done.
It's changing now, it's experience over qualification, so that's an important thing to remember.
100%.
One of the biggest topics that people are talking about right now is the different generation of learners and individuals. So I think within the business right now, we have 5 generations. We've got Gen Alpha, we've got Gen Z, we've got Millennials, we've got Gen X, I'm doing great, and we've got Baby Boomers. Amazing.
Well done.
Well done. I couldn't have done that.
I'll go home.
Thank you for coming.
That's the question.
So with all of these generations and all the generations in the world, how do we find a way of learning that applies to each of these generations? Because they've all been through different things, they've experienced different things. And the next question is going to be talking about changes in learning and development. But for this one, how do we help everyone learn?
Well, I think that we're looking at it, I think people in maybe the wrong way. People get caught up in that. They're like, oh, different generations, they learn very differently. How are we going to do this together? But we should be looking at it in the same way that we'd look at people in general. Everyone has their unique approach to learning or needs when they're learning, and that we need to discover that point and have commonalities in that sense rather than sticking with generational. It's amazing that we've got so many here on the island and that we've got that wealth of knowledge and experience, and we should be tapping into that rather than, I think, getting a little bit caught up with, is a baby boomer going to learn in the same way that someone as an alpha is learning? We just need to look at their learning needs and the different methods that might support those.
Definitely. I think it's a really important point, and one thing that's massive in the learning literature at the moment is people are getting in trouble for sheep, what's the word I'm trying to say? I don't know, Tom. Sheep dipping is the word I'm looking for. Entire generations, and sort of talking about the skills as a result of that. So people are generally saying that baby boomers, for example, aren't great with technology and Gen Alpha are, when in reality they're just two very extremes. They're going to be people in both of those populations that are good at both and not so good at both, in the same way that they would in general life. So I think the important thing there is to make sure that we're asking people what they want. Is this applicable to you? Are we helping people to understand? And I think one thing that we've even had this discussion today is that the sudden rise in social media apps like TikTok massively reduce our concentration span. Like, I can't watch TV now without doing something else at the same time. So one small principle that we're starting to try and adopt in the retail space is how can we make things quite light touch and quite easy to download information so that we can get all the information that we need in such a short space of time, which is not necessarily more catered towards learning styles. It's more around the pace of retail. Like, regardless of whether you're in retail or you're in head office, we're all running around 100 mile an hour all the time. So we need our learning to be sort of agile enough for people to be able to pick up and go at the same time. And I think it's really important that we seek that feedback from our islanders and that people tell us, because this is a new world. Like, there's not very often, we're still transitioning to a world that's massively digital. We're still trying to build out our portfolio of what people want in terms of on-demand learning. So it'd be great if people attend a workshop and maybe there are things that we can do. Tell us, we're happy.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of leaning into my next question, which is very rude, because I haven't even asked you yet.
Just
but,
thinking
you know,
ahead, Sasha.
I love it. See, when you're so good at what you do, you just know. You don't need to learn because you know. Anyway, I digress. So I'm going to move swiftly on into the next question, which is basically what you were just touching on about the developing world. There is so many things coming in and happening. One of the biggest things, I guess, like working from home, people are not coming into the office, and we talk about people learning on the job, and there's that question around how can you do that if you're not in the office or in that kind of space? How do you know to work around people or what it's like to work in an office? And things are different. So obviously when we were talking about the generations, they're getting a different learning experience in terms of being at work. And we've got things like technology and social media that you touched on. We've got this whole generation of, I want everything now. I don't want to have to learn and work hard for it. I want it now. How do we navigate this new world that we're living in and make sure we're getting the same learning experience that we were a few years ago? Do we start again and build from scratch, or do we try and go back?
Scrap it all.
Let's start.
And there you have it. Thank you for coming.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said learning experience. And learning is in its entity is an experience. It's not an operational training. It's not a factor of you do this course, you learn this thing, you're then good at this one singular thing. Learning's all about creating an experience where people feel like they can be fully immersed and taken away from the day-to-day. And then it's about sort of how we as facilitators would bring their day-to-day and that application to that learning to them. I think it's a really good question about the different vehicles that we've got now, such as technology, social media, on-demand resources. I think for me the really important thing is about having the destination. So if somebody's wanting to learn at work, what's that person's goal, and are they set up to be able to achieve that goal? If they're not, the relationships that they have in the business is really important to aid their learning journey. The big thing that we want to support people with through Learning at Work Week, but every other week in the year as well, is that we're here to signpost your learning and support you with your learning. We're not here to do it for you, because there's 7,770 odd people. Totally made that number up.
Very specific. I was about to say we're going to have to check.
Somebody check the numbers. we're just here to signpost and create spaces and pockets where you can be best. We're not here to do it for you.
Most definitely. I think as well, with all of that, it's sort of looking at a blended learning approach.
Yeah.
Previously, sort of the trends in learning or how people thought they would learn at work, I wasn't most suited for most individual. It was one way because we all worked in the office and we all did this. Whereas now I think we've got that opportunity that we're a lot more agile and flexible with how people work, where they work, that we've got an opportunity to explore lots of different methods and find the right avenue. Whereas previously it was, this is the one way. And now we can focus, if we know that sort of well-being and working at home is really important, that we can tailor things, and it also does put more space on people to be able to come up with their own decisions on how they want to learn. We can support you to figure out how you learn yourself and put you in the right spaces so that you can create that world for you, and you're not necessarily being told this is the one way. You'll get to figure it out and own that and take it away from even the island as a whole, because now you understand yourself a little bit more as well.
I think it's really scary that things are changing sometimes and people are like, oh, but there's a way to do it. But it gives us an opportunity, like you said, to just create something new. And the good thing about learning and development, which is what you're saying, is there's no one size fits all approach. It is kind of just adapting to what people want and what the business needs and making sure everyone gets their fix. So yeah, I love it. Love it. I want to know, because I'm a bit of a geek sometimes, I want to know, are there any trends or any themes running through the world of L&D at the moment? Talk to me. Tell me what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want me to go first?
Go on then.
Cool. So I think the main one that's not just an L&D trend, which is probably a world trend at the moment, is the use of AI and the massive rise of AI. I don't know if anybody here, physically here, or anybody watching is confident or has even explored the AI space, but even utilising tools like ChatGPT, if you've not used it, get to know it. It's a fantastic way to sort of start the foundations to something. There's loads of research to suggest that over the next 3 years in L&D, we're going to learn more than we did over the past 50 years with the sudden sort of resurgence of AI and it being something that we can really drive. It's going to really support L&D professionals to be able to be more tailored to their approach, but still be able to provide solutions to people on a mass scale, and that's always been the difficult thing. You can either do bulk learning, which applies to everybody, or you can do individual learning. It's quite difficult to blend the two, but as we get more confident and competent with AI, it should be able to sort of blend those two together. And similarly with that, over the next 5 to 10 years, AI will feature in business strategies. It's the way the world's going. It's fact. It's not a case of it if it will happen, it's when. And our job there is to provide spaces and learning solutions for people to feel confident using AI and you see it as an empowerment tool, not something to be scared of, because it gives people the license to think more creatively. It gives people a license to be able to be more strategic in their approach, not something that's just going to take away a lot of what they've got to do in the job.
Which is the scary part. But
Yeah.
I think you've just calmed me. You've busted another myth. Giving us too much time.
No,
Sorry.
that's true.
You go, Caviar. Your turn.
No, that's all right. It's definitely something I think everyone's quite afraid of. Me and Tom and I and Ade, who's also in the L&D team, went to learning technologies last week, and lots of people were speaking about AI, but lots of people were also talking about how where do I start? How do I even start thinking about this? Yeah. It's such a beast, I suppose, and there's so many different avenues that I think even thinking about how is it going to benefit me is quite scary for a lot of people. Yeah. But as you were saying, it can have so many benefits, even from sort of, you could have a little chat bot on our on Riva, on our learning management system, that can help you find things, because of course that's a small question but can make a big impact. If you can't find something, that can support you, whereas Tom and I can't always necessarily be there for you in those smaller instances. So even from something as simple as that, it could make such a big difference to people already. Some other things would be things like social learning. Or skills-based learning are big trends now. So we spoke a little bit about that social learning element before, but really being able to share skills across teams or across departments as well, and being able to understand, right, what skill sets do I have over here? Can I share that? Rather than you owning completely one thing and never sharing that knowledge. Which we know can cause lots of issues, because then suddenly somebody is not here, we don't know how to do that thing, and it makes the team struggle a little bit more. But then also being able to share, you're working through skills rather than sort of your task-based learning. So instead of focusing on your job description, I understand this one, I can do all of those tasks. We're thinking about what skills do you need for that role, for that capability. It means then you'll be able to move into different roles and still have really strong skill set that can be transferred over. So focusing on that, whether it's communication, which you know you're going to need in every single role, you will need to be able to adapt and be agile in that sense. So focusing on those rather than just your task-based skills is a really key trend, and which supports our sort of blended learning approach as well.
Yeah, that's a really important thing that I think you mentioned, because I don't think people focus on learning things specific to certain roles, but when you kind of expand a little bit and think a bit further ahead, then you start to think of that development piece. It's not just I'm not learning, sorry, I'm not just learning, I'm developing, I'm just saying. So it's important, and again, it goes back to that first question, what is the difference between the two? You can learn something, but when you think a bit bigger, the development kind of comes into play. My work here is done. I love it. So, I want to know then, we spoke about trends, we spoke about everything happening in terms of learning. It kind of answers itself, but I want you guys to be a bit specific here. What is so important about Learning at Work Week? Why do we need to have a week dedicated to reminding people the different ways to learn at work? What does it mean, and why is it important?
I think it's just... So we're going to be geeks about it because it's our world, but I think it's just an exciting time to encourage people and remind people that every day you are learning at work, whether it's learning from social learning, whether you're attending a workshop, whether you're completing an online module, regardless of what that is, whether you're going outside and having a conversation with somebody or serving a customer, you're learning from that experience. And I think a big thing for us that we really wanted to focus on this week was myth busting around what is learning versus what is development, and being able to blend the two together and encourage people to take control of their own learning is something that is really powerful to me in this week.
Nice, definitely. I think it's just taking that time to sit down, reset, think about it. What have I been doing to support my learning? Each day when I come in, am I taking a little bit of time to reflect on what I've learned or how I'm developing? You are constantly gathering information, you're moving forward, but it also reminds everyone to take a time to look back at that a little bit and then start planning to look forward as well. I think we get caught up, don't we, with doing the next task, the moving on to the next project, whatever it is, however your team works, but we don't necessarily spend a lot of time to think, what's the best way for myself to move forward in my career? And we'll sort of get lost in the role and the task, but we don't necessarily think about our own journeys. And I think Learning at Work Week can really help us pull all of that together and really have a little bit of a look and reflect.
Definitely. I think as well, there's a big piece about role modelling as well. Like, we need to encourage people more to take time for their own learning, and it's a big part of your role. There's going to be things that you need to learn to be successful in your role, be that operational, behavioural, strategic, whatever those skills are. So if we can encourage people to normalise and say, no, I'm attending that workshop or I'm doing that course and that's my priority in this hour, everything else can wait, I think that's a really important thing, that we can role model that behaviour to everybody on the island, to know that taking time for your development isn't a nice to have, it's an essential.
Yeah, I feel like it's great to stop, like from what you're saying, it's great to just stop and reflect, even if it's one thing that you take. You guys have a plethora of things that you do, and even if it's just one thing that you think about in terms of learning at work, it's important to do that, and this week is just a good time to do it, I think. So yeah, I love that. So my last question, you guys have been amazing guests, by the way, I just want to say, so thank you so much.
I don't want it to end. Can we not just do this all day?
We will be chatting after this, you already know. Lots more to say. I mean, we will bring you back because you've been great. I just want to ask you one question, which we have to ask. What is one tip that you can share with learners? And that's everyone, basically, because everyone learns, which we've learned today. We just keep learning, and I'm going to say the word learn until it gets weird. Learn. Anyway, what's one top tip that you'll have for learners? I'll share mine first. It's always more energy, more passion. Anyway, I'm so excited. Back to being serious. What's one top tip for learners that you've got today?
Do you want to go first?
Go on then.
You lead the way.
Okay, so my top tip would be always be courageous or be brave with your learning. The more vulnerable you are, the more open you are, the more information you'll be able to take on. You'll be able to share things about yourself to learn or unlearn. And I think having that courageousness to be vulnerable in those spaces also earns you a lot of respect from the rest of the team and the business, and it really will pave your way to being able to be the best that you can be.
I love it. And Tom?
I feel like I don't know if I can answer as well as that.
No pressure. But
I know, yeah.
Do you know what you need to do?
Flop
if you can't
this.
answer as well, just add more energy, more passion.
I'm not doing the dance again. You got it once. I would say mine is to always be curious, and that's in every aspect of your role and in your life. Ask questions, get to understand more, and the more you understand, the more you will learn. So start by asking 3 questions, and Cameo knows I use these 3 questions for everything that I do. Why are we doing something? Why is it adding value? Why is this the important thing for us to focus on? What is it exactly that I need to do? What's the part that I need to play, or what's the role or learning that I need to engage with? And then how is that going to make a difference? So if you keep yourself true to those 3 questions, why, what and how, you'll very, very quickly sort of start to speed up and accelerate that learning journey.
I love it. I feel like it's on brand to say this, but I've just learned a lot.
We'll pay you later.
Just thank you. No, honestly, it's been so insightful and so amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to share this with us. And I hope everyone has learned something today. Have you learned something today?
Definitely.
Yes.
Social learning.
We have.
I love it.
About each other.
Thank you so much to our L&D team for joining us today. I just want to say this first episode is sponsored by The Edit, which is our monthly magazine to celebrate our islanders and everything they've done. So if you haven't checked it out, it's the April edition. Please go check it out. We'll be putting the links on all of our socials. And remember, rewatch this, get a notebook, get a pen and some paper, because they've just been amazingly inspirational. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks
for having us. Bye.
Bye.